It's music theory. Online, let's learn some theory. Online, by watching modules. Online, with music theory. Online.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Module 3 of the Senior Theory course. In the last two modules we reviewed major and minor scales and we learned about the church modes. Do you remember the saying to help you with the names of the modes? It was, "Don't play loud music at lunch, Iggy." That gives us the Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, and Ionian modes. Non-diatonic scales may have more or fewer than 8 consecutive notes. Non-diatonic scales may or may not begin or end on the same note. Non-diatonic scales do not have a tonic. Non-diatonic scales do not have technical names for the degrees of the scales. There are 5 types of non-diatonic scales. They're the whole tone scale, the chromatic scale, the pentatonic scale, the blues scale, and the church modes. Today we're going to learn about 2 more non-diatonic scales, the whole tone scale and the chromatic scale. The whole tone scale has 6 different notes and each is separated by a whole tone. The first and the last notes are the same, and as the name implies, there are no semitones, only whole tones. There are only 2 types of whole tone scales, the whole tone scale beginning on C and the whole tone scale beginning on C sharp or D flat. Here we have the whole tone scale beginning on C. The beauty of this scale is that if you start on C, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, or A sharp, it's always going to be those same notes. So you can start on any note. It just means that these 2 scales, the one that begins on C and the one that begins on C sharp or D flat, they incorporate all 12 notes that are found within the octave. Here we have the whole tone scale beginning on D flat. It can be written on D flat, or on this example you see it's written on C sharp. These 2 scales are identical because remember we have enharmonic twins. When you're writing the whole tone scale, one of the note names must be skipped. You can skip whichever you choose. Remember to keep the note names in their simplest form. That means avoid using double flats, double sharps, or accidentals like C flat or E sharp. Avoid mixing sharps and flats. Also, the key signatures are never used. Remember, any note of the scale can be used as the starting note. These scales are all based on the C whole tone scale. The first one beginning on C is what we saw in the previous slide. This skipped note here is the B. This is what it sounds like. While the next one begins on F sharp, it's identical to the previous scale that began on C. It also skips the note B. It just starts on a different note, and it sounds like this. This last scale begins on G sharp, and it sounds like this. Again, it's identical to the 2 previous whole tone scales. Here we see the whole tone scale written on C sharp. All of the same rules still apply. You need to skip one note and you can't mix your sharps or flats. Remember, there is no key signature. While this slide shows C sharp, you could also write the whole tone scale on D flat. Here's what these whole tone scales sound like. The term chromatic derives from the Greek word chroma, which means color. The chromatic scale is a musical scale with 12 pitches, and each pitch is a semitone apart. That means that the chromatic scale is made up entirely of semitones. Like all of the scales that we've studied, the first note and the last note are the same. Because the chromatic scale is made up of semitones, there is no central key. Remember as well that the chromatic scale has no whole tones. When you're writing chromatic scales, begin by writing the tonic and dominant notes. These notes should not be changed when writing the chromatic scale. The next step is to write 2 of each note between the tonic and the dominant, and between the dominant and the tonic. You'll see that we have 1 D, 2 E's, 2 F's, 2 G's, 1 A, which is the dominant, then 2 B's, 2 C's, and a D. The next step is to insert accidentals where necessary to form the semitones. Careful with writing the accidentals descending. The biggest mistake students make is writing incorrect accidentals. Draw a key signature if it's necessary. Remember that you shouldn't alter the tonic and the dominant notes. A bar line at the top of the scale will cancel the preceding accidentals and may make the descending scale easier to read. This is what this chromatic scale sounds like. This is called a harmonic chromatic scale. This form of the chromatic scale can use a key signature. Be careful though to remember the key signature when you're adding the accidentals. Let's look at this first example. The key signature is for G major, which means an F natural was needed, ascending and descending. The second example is using the E flat major key signature. Careful though to observe that key signature. You'll notice we needed to use the natural sign here with the E, here with the A, and here with the B. So chromatic scales use all the semitones from tonic to tonic. You'll begin by writing the tonic and the dominant notes. Then you can add a second note to each of the other notes. However, you only have 1 note for the tonic and the dominant. The next step would be to add accidentals. Remember that when you're writing a harmonic chromatic scale that you can use a key signature. We've covered 2 more non-diatonic scales today. We talked about the whole tone scale and the chromatic scale. Once you've practiced writing these scales, I think you'll find that they're not that difficult. Just be careful with the chromatic scale to double check your accidentals. I hope to see you at Theory Club this week, and I look forward to marking your theory papers. Have a super duper week. Bye now.
It's music theory. Online, let's learn some theory. Online, by watching modules. Online, with music theory. Online.